Hello, students. It's October the 4th, 2023, the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi. I am Professor Scott McDermott of Albany State University in Georgia, and my friend Mrs. Dudek told me that you were studying Charles Carroll of Carrollton this week, and that you might be interested in hearing something about him from me because I wrote this book called Charles Carroll of Carrollton, Faithful Revolutionary. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to be speaking to you, young people of the Catholic Schoolhouse Homeschooling Group. Charles Carroll of Carrollton was the wealthiest signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was also the last one to die in 1832 at the ripe old age of 95. And of course, as you know, he was the only Catholic signer of the Declaration. So you might think that he had a very easy life. However, he had to overcome a lot of adversity in his life. His early years were very difficult. Although his parents, Charles Carroll of Annapolis and Elizabeth Carroll, were both Catholics, they were not married when their son, whom they called Charlie, was born. In fact, they did not marry legally until he was 19 years old. Not only did this cause a lot of gossip among Charlie's peers, it also put a lot of pressure on him. He seems to have thought his father would never marry his mother unless he proved himself to be a worthy son. So young Charles Carroll had a lot of anxiety about pleasing his dad. Also, at that time, Catholic schools were illegal in the British colony of Maryland. So when Charlie was 11, his father put him on a ship across the Atlantic Ocean and sent him to be educated by priests of the Society of Jesus at Saint-Omer, France. This meant that young Carroll never saw his mother again, since she died before her husband finally allowed their son to complete his education and return home at age 27. And once Charles Carroll did finally return to Maryland, he found himself legally barred from voting or holding public office, like all other Catholics in Maryland. Maryland had been originally founded as a Catholic colony, but it was taken over by Protestant Christians in 1688. The new leaders believed that Catholics were a danger to the British Empire. In fact, they saw them in a way as all potential terrorists, for reasons that are too complex for me to explain to you in the time I have with you today, but you can certainly read more about that if you're interested. However, Carroll refused to give up in spite of all of these obstacles. And when the American Revolution broke out in 1775, he saw an opportunity for Catholics to obtain their right to worship God according to the teachings of the Church. The respect that Carroll earned for his service as a member of the Continental Congress and later as a United States Senator was crucial in obtaining religious freedom for Catholics in this country. So, what principles and what methods did Charles Carroll of Carrollton follow that helped him to achieve this goal? First, Carroll was willing to work with allies in the revolutionary cause who were not Catholic, and some who were not even Christian. In other words, he did not hide himself in a Catholic enclave in order to protect himself from the outside world. He did not refuse to cooperate with anyone outside of the Catholic community, that is, anyone who disagreed with him or his faith. In order to build bridges and reach non-Catholics, he used the language of natural law. Now, the natural law is the law of God for us human beings. It teaches us how we're to live as children of God to lead happy and fulfilled lives. The idea of natural law came from the Catholic tradition, but at that time, many people outside the Catholic Church also accepted this way of thinking. For example, Thomas Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, speaks of, quote, the laws of nature and of nature's God, end quote, as the whole basis for the American Revolution. And this is not really surprising, since the Catholic Church teaches that God has put the natural law into the hearts of all women and all men, not just Catholics. Next, Carroll did stick closely to the Catholic political principles he had learned in France, even while he was working with non Catholics. He especially emphasized the Catholic teaching that the common good of the whole society, not individual rights, is the object or the goal of politics. In other words, there are times when the good of the whole society has to override the desires of individuals. Thirdly, like all of the founding fathers, Charles Carroll believed in the right of the people to resist tyranny. Now, what is tyranny? Tyranny. Or what is it when the ruler is a tyrant? This means that if the government stops caring about the common good and also about people's individual rights, if the government hurts or oppresses the people, that government might be a tyranny. And if the people can prove that it's a tyranny, they have the right to overthrow it and replace it with a better government according to the natural law of God. However, Carroll also knew that just because a government permits things to happen in society that go against Catholic teaching, this doesn't necessarily mean the government is a tyranny yet. Even St. Thomas Aquinas said that governments can allow lesser evils to happen for the sake of avoiding greater ones. An example of a greater evil might be a civil war if the government tried to stamp out some lesser evil. The surest test of a tyranny is this: if the government requires or forces its citizens to act against the natural law of God, then that is a tyranny. At that point, the people should overthrow it and replace it with a better system according to the natural law of God. Finally, even though Carroll worked with men who disagreed with him, he would never support any politician who he thought cared only about his own personal power rather than the good of society as a whole. Carroll hated dictators like Napoleon Bonaparte, who made himself the emperor of the French and tried to take over Europe. So that leaves us with the question, what is our task as faithful Catholics in a mostly non-Catholic society as we try to follow in the footsteps of Charles Carroll? I think he would say that we should try to seek common ground with other Americans, even the ones who disagree with us, but that we should also always remain firmly grounded in our Catholic tradition and try to promote the authentic Catholic meaning of concepts like the natural law, the common good, and individual rights whenever and wherever we can. And of course, we should always try to set the best possible example as Catholics so that our fellow Americans may be drawn in greater numbers to the true and the most holy Catholic faith. Thank you for listening. I wish you all the best.